tellement conditionné à l'entendre en anglais qu'on ne sait plus comment dire en français. C'est quand même fou, hein? Ouais. Alors, ah oui, mon micro. Alors, je suis tellement habitué de l'entendre.
I'm so used to hearing it in English.
C'est quoi en français, là?
À l'ordre. So used to hearing this in English. It's kind of special not to know how to say this. Anyway, welcome everyone. You have the opportunity today to have the Bloc Québécois as chair of the Justice and Human Rights Committee. You're so lucky. So welcome to meeting number 80 of this House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Pursuant to the order of June 21, 2023, this committee is sitting in public and will begin its examination of Bill C-321 to amend the Criminal Code on assaults against healthcare professionals or first responders. Today's meeting will be in hybrid format pursuant to the order of the House of June 2022. Members who are here in person, let me start over. Members sitting virtually can use the Zoom application. I would like to remind you of certain things for the benefit of witnesses. You must wait to be recognized by the chair by name before speaking. Those participating by video conference must click on the microphone icon in order to activate it and to put it on mute when you're not speaking. You have the choice of interpretation with a button on your screen, which can be floor, French, or English. For those in the room, you can use the headset and select the language of your choice. Let me remind you that comments must be addressed to the chair. For members in the room who wish to speak, you can raise your hand. For those who are on Zoom, please use the raise hand function on your screen. The clerk and I will do our best to make sure you are recognized and have your turn to speak. We appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. That's a bad translation. I'm sorry. The clerk informs me that sound tests have been made with Mr. Garrison, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Housefather appearing virtually and were satisfactory. If anybody has a problem with the sound, please tell us and we'll suspend the meeting to solve the problem. So I welcome Mr. Doherty, a member of Parliament for Cariboo Prince George and sponsor of Bill 321, who will speak for the first hour of our meeting. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Doherty, to make your opening remarks, and then we'll go to questions from the members. We have 6 minutes for each party, 6 for the Conservatives, 6 for the Liberals, 6 for the Bloc, and 6 for the NDP on the first turn, and then 5 minutes for the Conservatives and Liberals, 2.5 for the Bloc and the NDP in the second round, after which we will adjourn to go to the second hour of our meeting, where we will be hearing other witnesses. So, Mr. Doherty, you have the floor.
If I might, before my time starts, Mr. Chair, I would like to first offer our colleague, Mr. Housefather. I overheard his sound test, and if I heard him correctly, he has just come back from attending a funeral of a constituent that lost her life in the original attack, Hamas attack, on October 7th. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer my condolences to him. I also would like to send my heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims, families and friends of the victims of the horrible mass shooting that's taken place in Lewiston, Maine, as well as the first responders, the hundreds of first responders that are out searching for this the shooter that attended and witnessed horrible events, some of whom I know personally, as I was just informed prior to this testimony. And also, Mr. Chair, through you, I would like to offer to my colleagues that I know that we are starting late. We have witnesses with lived experience, and the reality is this is why we're here, is to hear them, not myself. And if any testimony is to be cut short, if you are, because we are starting late, if there's any hour that is to be cut short, I wish it to be mine so that we give our witnesses the full hour to be able to, for you to hear truly why this bill is so important. So I'll leave that with you and the committee, Mr. Chair, and with that I'll start. Mr. Chair and committee members, guests and fellow witnesses, I want to thank you for the invitation to speak to my private member's bill C-321. You've probably all heard me say this before, but it bears repeating today. In my mind, real heroes don't wear capes. They wear arm patches that say paramedic, nurse, firefighter, police officer, corrections. They're our brothers, our sisters, daughters, families, family friends, and neighbors. They leave their house each day and every day knowing that there is a very real possibility that they may never come home. When others run from danger, they run towards it. They run into burning buildings. They run towards gunfire. They have our backs in our most desperate moments. They hold our hand when we take our last breath. They're on the other end of a line when we mutter our last words. And they're on the front lines taking care of us, making sure we get the help we need when we need it. And often their service comes at a great sacrifice to themselves. They are true heroes in every sense of the word, and they need to know that we have their backs. How far we have fallen, where it has become okay to hunt police officers, paramedics, to hurt a nurse when they're simply just trying to take your blood. Mr. Chair and colleagues, in the last year alone, we've lost 11 police officers, 11 brave men and women who were only trying to do their job, who were there to serve and protect us. They gave their lives in service to each of us. The police have their own section of the criminal code that deals with assaults and makes it an aggravating factor for sentencing. It is the same code that transit operators have. But sadly, paramedics, nurses, firefighters, frontline healthcare workers, they don't have the same protections. They deserve the same protections. Firefighters, first responders they do not have the right to refuse dangerous work. Mr. Chair, there have been a number of studies that have shown an increase in the types of incidents of violence against our healthcare workers. The Canadian Federation of Nurses discussion paper, Enough is Enough, Putting a Stop to the Violence in the Healthcare Sector, clearly lays out the need for legislation such as this. The number of violence-related loss claims for frontline healthcare workers increased by almost 66% over the past decade. 2/3 of nurses report wanting to or considering leaving their job due to the threat of violence that they face each and every day. I recently visited a hospital and had a supervisor come to my side and thank me in tears for putting this bill forward. She told me the story of a nurse in her charge who was recently thrown to the floor and kicked by a patient. This bill was born out of the countless stories I've heard, that we have all heard. Far too often, violent attacks against paramedics, nurses, and firefighters go unreported. They go unpunished. How many times do these incidents go unreported? How many times does someone say to themselves, it's not that big of a deal? It's not worth reporting. It won't matter anyway. We need to stop the complacency. We need to stop violence in the workplace. We need people to know that it's never acceptable and it's not part of their job. Some time ago, I received a message from a paramedic who simply was responding to, by all accounts, a routine 911 call. When they tried to help, they were thrown down a flight of stairs. They were viciously stomped, their ankles broken, their arm broken. Or the story about the Ottawa paramedic who was punched in the stomach, bitten so hard that it left an open wound, kicked in the groin trying to lift a patient off the floor. Or Julie, who was sexually assaulted in the back of an ambulance, then told it wasn't worth prosecuting because they never get convicted, or if they do, it's a slap on the wrist? Or what about the Saskatoon paramedic who was punched in the face with a closed fist, suffering a concussion, and was encouraged to drop the charges because his assailant was going to anger management classes? Or what about Jennifer, a paramedic who was attacked on New Year's Eve by an intoxicated man as she tried to help him onto a stretcher outside of a bar? Then told the Crown was dropping the charges because her injuries weren't sufficient for a conviction. What message does that send to our frontline personnel? Alex, who was attempting to help an intoxicated teenage female in the back of an ambulance when she broke free from restraints and heel kicked him in the face before getting punched repeatedly. Or Crystal, the nurse who was walking down the corridor when a patient being pushed in a wheelchair from an opposite direction lunged out of the chair and attacked her without warning. These are just a few of the stories that have touched my life. These are the stories why this bill needs to pass. I know that my bill is not the be-all to end-all, but it's another tool in the box, and it forces justice system to look seriously at these crimes. Simply put, Mr. Chair, that C-321 will act as a deterrent and it will save lives. The bill has broad support from many first responders, and I'm proud to say that the IAFF are here. We have members from the Peel Region paramedics. As a matter of fact, we have representation from the IAFF from Washington, D.C. That's why this bill is so important. And Mr. Speaker, I'll cede the floor, and I'm ready for any questions that you may have.
Merci, Monsieur Doherty, pour votre...
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Doherty. We'll start the first round with Mr. Van Popta for 6 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Doherty, it's a real honor to have you here as a witness today. It's always great to have one of our colleagues present their draft legislation, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think this is a very important piece of legislation. If passed, it'll certainly send a very strong message to our healthcare workers that Canada's Parliament has their backs, as you say. Got a couple of specific questions. First of all, so your bill would amend Section 269 of the Criminal Code.
That's correct.
To require judges to take into consideration when sentencing a person who's convicted of assaulting a healthcare worker. But I noticed that in your draft bill, you do not actually have a definition for healthcare professional or first responder. And I wonder if there was a reason for that, if you wanted to keep it more general, or if you think that the bill would be improved by having a clear definition. And I would say that your legislation mirrors legislation that already exists relating to offenses against public transit workers. And there is a definition for public transit workers. So over to you. Why not a definition?
No, I take that comment to heart. I understand it, and I agree. Perhaps, and I'm at the will and whim of the committee if they so choose. I had the same conversation with our colleague from the NDP regarding healthcare professional, healthcare worker, and I'm amenable to these changes if needed.
Okay. Do you have any proposed language for definitions, or is it something we should ask the experts?
No. Well, we do have actually legislation on that. It's interesting. When we first did my other bill, C-211, first responder actually wasn't defined in Canadian legislation, and through our work, we managed to get that defined to a certain extent. But a first responder can be a police, fire, ambulance, corrections, nurse, emergency room personnel, but we can get you the definitions, and I'll submit to the House that we'll get you the definitions by the end of tomorrow.
Good. Thank you very much. That would be helpful. I also noticed that in your draft legislation, it covers assault, bodily death and bodily harm, assault with weapon, aggravated assault, but it does not include sexual assault. Is that also an oversight, or is there a specific reason?
That's a great question. I think again we'll leave it to the experts, and if the committee so chooses, we've definitely heard from first responders, especially paramedics in the back of or nurses, that there is that as well. So we absolutely.
Good. Now, you've said that your bill, if it becomes law, will definitely make a difference in protecting healthcare workers and perhaps even preventing death. Do you have statistics that we could look at?
We do. Yeah, we'll send those to you.
Okay. If you could send that, is it from Canadian data?
It's Canadian data. The Canadian Nurses Association, as well as the BC Nurses Association, have left or have submitted documents to us on that, reports on that.
Okay, good, thank you. Just one more question, and that is, I'm going back to existing section 269.01, which is similar to your proposed legislation, but referring to transit workers. So that has been with us for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if that has actually made a difference in sentencing when the assault was against a transit worker? So what positive effect might we expect from your draft bill when it comes to sentencing?
Well, that's a good question. What's the, what's the result if we do nothing? I guess simply is what you're asking. I think that's a question that, rather than asking me, I think you should ask the other witnesses that are here, because, whether it's the IAFF, the BC Nurses Association, the Canadian Nurses Association, the Police Chiefs of Canada, or Frontline Forces, they've all come on board and said that this bill is needed to send a deterrent, a clear message that as legislators, that we value the service and the sacrifice of our frontline personnel, and that we will not tolerate any acts of violence against them.
Good, thank you very much. I believe I'm out of time. So.
No.
Oh.
You're not. Vous avez pas. Il vous reste 1 minute et 15.
You have 1 minute, 15 seconds left, but you can give your time away if you wish.
Quick question then. So, back to statistics and data. Has there been a trend, a negative trend in the last couple of years? And to what would you accredit that? Might the pandemic have something to do with it, or the opioid overdose crisis? Are these factors?
Well, I think with the prevalence of social media, these reports are becoming more and more noticeable. We're seeing it more often. Obviously, we're just coming out of a pandemic where people were locked up, where people were frustrated and angry, and there just seems to be, I don't know what it is. I honestly, I mean, I'm at a loss of words as I opened with this. When did it all of a sudden become okay to strike a nurse as they're trying to take your blood? When did it become okay to hunt and target paramedics or firefighters that are just simply trying to fight a fire? It sure seems, to your question, in the last 2 to 3 years that there has been an increase in this. And I think when you talk to our witnesses that are here, you're going to hear the same.
Merci, Monsieur Van Popta.
Thank you, Mr. Van Popta. Now we'll give the floor to Ms. Brière for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for being with us today, Mr. Doherty, and for this bill, for having worked with you as Parliamentary Secretary to Mental Health and Addiction. We recognize that you're a very sensitive person. In the preamble to the bill, you mentioned that there are incidents of violence against healthcare professionals and first responders that have physical and psychological impact. Do you have any data on those impacts? Are they more prevalent among healthcare professionals than in other fields of work?
The data that we have in terms of the rates of violence against nurses or healthcare workers is 66% higher than that of their counterparts in frontline services. 66% higher. I'll bring this our committee back to another reason. Another area where our bill was born out of was a study that was done by the Standing Committee on Health in June of 2019, violence facing healthcare workers in Canada, and I can submit this to the committee as well too, where the recommendation number 3 out of it was exactly what our bill is prescribing, and they've studied this as well too.
Merci. Aussi,
Thank you. You are surely familiar with the clause 718I.2.3, which is concern an aggravated situation when there's been assault against a worker or person who, in the course of their duties, provided health care services. So what does your bill add to that particular clause, since we're already talking about people who provide health care services?
Complements that very clearly. I believe that's from C3. And it's been, look, our bill, C3, 345, that I believe our colleagues from the NDP, are all bills that complement one another. There isn't just one tool in the toolbox that, as legislators or as that our legal society needs. Our bill doesn't just, they're not just doing a job at that time, but the act of violence against them recognizes that that they are a nurse or a paramedic. What if they're off duty? What if they're still using their or wearing their uniform and coming from work, traveling on transit or going to their car? Can it be said that they're performing their duties at that time? We've got colleagues that are here right now or witnesses that are here right now that are wearing their uniforms. What if they're walking on the street and there's an act of violence that are perpetuated against them? The fact of the matter, that 321 covers the fact that that victim is either a healthcare worker or a frontline first responder, that they're protected. It sends a clear message.
est-ce que, justement, dans un but que
So, with the objective of having this bill address as many people as possible, would you be open to an amendment that would say, for instance, a person who provides healthcare services rather than talking about a healthcare professional and a first responder?
I think, again, I think, I think that's a good question. I think that's something for this committee to decide and go from there. As with any piece of legislation, the devil's in the details, and do we let perfection get in the way of good work? Do we, and other pieces of legislation that we've seen, do we make the list so onerous that it can't be applied, that it weakens it? I think that is for the sage and wise direction that this group has right here as you move forward and study the bill.
puis si j'ai encore un peu de temps.
Do I have any time left? Yes, thank you. This would be 269.1 in 01. It talks about public transit drivers. In paragraph 2, there's a series of definitions. Do you believe that we should also add definitions to better define?
Adding the definitions, and I was very clear when I had my conversation with Mr. Davies that was an error on our part in our rush to get that done and get that tabled. I think it would only strengthen it.
OK. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Briere. So I'll give myself the floor now, and I accept it. So, Mr. Doherty, I think that your bill is a good one. I think the intentions are excellent, and probably the majority or probably all of the members of the committee would agree with you. You said yourself the devil's in the details, and indeed we have to look at that. The question of definitions is a bit troublesome to me. I think I understood in your answers to Mr. Van Popta that you're going to send us your proposal for definitions by tomorrow at the end of business. Is that what I understood?
I can do that, Mr.
OK.
Yeah.
Et
Okay. I was listening to Ms. Briere talking about a broadening of healthcare professionals to people involved in the healthcare system. It reminded me that this can become very broad. Would a massage therapist be a healthcare professional? Do we want that person to be protected? I'm not against the fact that they be protected, but let's agree that we're talking about increasing a sentence or making it an aggravating circumstance with the occupation of these people. So that is something we have to think about. And that leads me to ask myself about a word in 26902 that says that the court shall consider as an aggravating circumstance. We know that in some cases it's quite clear. Somebody who attacks a doctor because he's treating somebody else, that's a clear case. There's no doubt it's an aggravating circumstance. Nobody would contest that. But there may be more delicate circumstances or gray zones where a patient who's treated by a doctor and who in pain might threaten that doctor. I'm going to cut your hands off if you touch me one more time, something like that. So don't you think that those are situations that deserve that the court say, well, these are not really threats. There's a context here. There's a nuance. So shall consider it as an aggravating circumstances. Is that not too constraining for the courts? Isn't it better to say that the courts can consider this as an aggravating circumstance?
Mr. Chair, we've had interesting conversations about this, and you always bring bring food for thought. Look, I'm not a legal expert, and I'm not here to try and say that I am. I will leave the committee to decide that. What I'm telling you today is that we have people that don their uniform each and every day. I think common sense has to come into play here. We have people that don their uniform each and every day just to serve you, your family, and my family. And in the course of doing so, there are violent acts that have been taken against them. They've been hunted, they've been shot, they've been stabbed. Why does a paramedic have to wear a bulletproof vest at this point? It's a good question, but do we run the risk of making this bill so watered down, or so? Are you again? I mean, I'm not being combative. I'm just saying, I guess the question is when does common sense come into play, and again, I'll leave that to the committee to make those deliberations.
Merci, Monsieur Doherty. Mais,
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. But in the same vein, I have about 1.5 minutes, 1.75 minutes. Am I to understand that you would not be uncomfortable when you say common sense has to prevail? Should we trust the courts to decide on things and apply this provision according to the rules of common sense? If we give some maneuver to the courts and say that the court can consider this as an aggravating circumstance, that would allow the presiding judge to say, yes, this is a situation where this is truly an aggravating circumstance that we shall consider. Would that be common sense to allow that discretion to the courts?
Respect, Mr. Chair, I'm saying that common sense in terms of a charge or somebody that reporting this, I would say that a doctor that is attending a patient that is clearly under duress says, I'm going to cut your hands off. I don't think that doctor is going to say that I felt threatened with that. I think there's common sense that is in play that would come into play, and that doctor would probably be the first to say, clearly that patient was under duress and did not understand what they were saying or doing at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Garrison for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I too want to join others in the committee in thanking Mr. Doherty for bringing this bill forward and drawing attention to what's become a serious problem in our society, and that is the attacks on healthcare providers and first responders. I want to go back to something you touched on briefly in your introduction, and that's the question of why we have seen this increase, this spike in violence. Some have pointed to the effects of the pandemic, and some members of the public disagreeing with public health decisions. And others have talked about things like the opioid crisis, where those under the influence of drug are much more likely to be violent in their response to those attempting to help them. And I think if we think a little more about causes, we may be able to think of other ways in which we could help find preventative measures to stop these kinds of attacks. I wonder whether you could say a little bit more, Mr. Doherty, about why you think that this is occurring.
Well, I wish, thank you, Mr. Garrison. It's good to see you. I wish I knew. I wish I had a crystal ball as to, I wish I had the answers. I wish, you know, my daughter is she's a psych nurse. And I'm going to get emotional doing this. You guys all know me to be a big baby. She was involved in a bad car accident 2 days ago. She's a mobile car nurse, and so she goes to where her patients are. This patient was in a tent city off the side of a highway, and once she finished administering treatment, she had to cross the highway to get back to her office. She was broadsided by a semi-truck. I was never concerned or worried about my daughter going to and from work. I was concerned about my daughter at work when she told me she was going to become a psych nurse. I was concerned when she would show up, and she's just a tiny person. She definitely didn't get my genetics. She is good looking though. That is the very real thing that we live with now each and every day, and not just our family, but every family. He knows he's got the Kleenex box. Yeah, thanks. But that's the reality of the families that have loved ones that are first responders or nurses or healthcare providers. And Mr. Garrison, to answer your question, I don't know what the rising costs or what has caused the rising rates of violence. Society as a whole, and you know, I have so much colorful language that I'd like to say that we've just gone bonkers to the fact that it used to be you see somebody with a uniform and you thank them for their service. Like, how do these? I don't even know. And this is I'm asking our committee, like, why would anybody want to do that? You know, these are honorable professions, but why would you want to put yourself in the line of fire, so to speak, each and every day? But they do. They sign up so that they can help and heal and be safe and make sure our communities are safe and secure. And instead, they worry about their life each and every day. They worry if they're able to come home safe and sound or alive. It's just, or make it, or at all. I mean, it's just, you know, if I wish that we didn't need Bill C-321 or C-3 or 345, but the reality is we do. The reality is we need to send a strong message to society that we value the work that these individuals and the nurses and the doctors and the people that are on our front lines, that we value the work they put in each and every day. And violence is never okay. Probably ate all your time, sorry.
30 secondes.
Thank you for bringing your personal experiences to bear. I think that what you're highlighting here highlights another problem we have in health professions and first responders. That's retention of people in these professions, people who have been trained, who have experience, who are essential to providing public safety and public health. quite often leaving the profession because of this problem of violence. And so I think one of the things that you've done by introducing the bill is help bring public attention to this. And I think that public attention is going to be an important part of helping to solve this problem. So I know I'm just about out of time. I'll end on that note here. Thank you, Mr. Doherty.
Appreciate Mr. Garrison.
Merci, Monsieur Garrison.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Toputo for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to also thank Mr. Doherty here for being such an advocate in this area. I think we've all come to appreciate his strong work when it comes to health, mental health, and also his ardent advocacy for our first responders. I want to pick up on a theme that Mr. Doherty himself just put out there a few minutes ago. It was actually a question I was going to ask, and he said, when did it become okay to assault somebody, to assault a nurse? And I was wondering the same thing. And one thing I noticed, and it used to be, for instance, if somebody assaulted a police officer, it was just considered a horrible offense. Jail was presumed. And it wasn't whether you went to jail, it was generally how long, often up to 6 months for a simple assault on a police officer. And what I've noticed, and I'll ask for Mr. Doherty's opinion on this, I'm thinking back to one case where a police officer was literally kicked in the face. You could see the boot print on his face. And the result was a conditional discharge, which meant the person had no criminal record. And that's kind of where I think we've seen things go. And we've seen it go that far when it comes to police, but other people in uniform. Can you comment on that, just the disrespect for the uniform itself?
Yeah, it's I wish our colleagues around the room could sit in the meetings that I have with first responders, with paramedics, with ambulance, with police or fire, or nurses. It's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking. I do get emotional with this because I feel the weight of the world. I feel we're carrying their hopes that we will do something. How many of these? To your point, Mr. Caputo, how many of these incidents just go unreported because they know nothing will happen? Or their supervisors tell them, don't bother, it's not worth the paperwork because nothing's going to happen. I had a paramedic that was assaulted in the back of an ambulance. That person, she reported it. That person was went to jail, or was taken to the police station, was out within hours, and back in that paramedic's ambulance the very next day to traumatize this person. I can't imagine. I simply can't imagine going to work. Can you think of us in the job that we do? If we put our suits and clothes on and our shoes on each and every day and knew that we were going to face violence. We're even seeing some of that. But could you imagine when all you want to do is heal somebody, fix somebody, make our community safe? It's shocking. And it really speaks to how far we have fallen as a society. And to your point, how we've got this kind of revolving door where it's people can commit some of the most heinous of crimes, and within hours or days, they're back out on the street doing the same thing. It just reminds me of, it's bad.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. I know that we're getting close to the 4:30 cutoff time. My proposal, Mr. Chair, would be if Mr. Doherty would be amenable, is if I ask him another brief question, or I'm happy to end now, so that we can get the other panel on, and perhaps if the panel is, or if the if the committee's okay, he could still be present in the event somebody else has a question for him. He'd be available ad hoc.
Merci, M. Caputo. C'est une bonne idée.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. That's a good idea. Our last round of questions, Mr. Maloney for 5 minutes.
Mr. Caputo took the words out of my mouth. I want to get to the first responders, and I appreciate that offer, Mr. Doherty. Look, I've been working with you for 8 years, and I've always admired the level of passion you bring to our job, but more importantly, and reflected today, the amount of compassion you bring to this job. And this bill is another example of that. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. We have to not only make people like your daughter want to do this job, but we need to make people like your daughter understand that we have their backs and we're there for them. You talk about first responders during the pandemic. Everybody rightfully was thanking first responders. You can never thank them enough, but I'll never forget, I had a paramedic come to my office one day, and she came out, she didn't come out and say it, but she sort of suggested that, paramedics were sort of always left off that list. And it left a very, very powerful impression with me. So it's my way of saying thank you again for doing this, but I want to get onto the second panel because I know we have some paramedics here. So I will stop there. And you've made it very clear that you're willing to accept amendments because, look, there's a consensus around this table. It's readily apparent. We support the bill. We just want to avoid any overlap potential from C3. And I think you've already agreed, as Ms. Briere pointed out, to the amendment that would mirror the language with respect to healthcare professionals and those providing healthcare services, so that could be accomplished. Because you're right, you want to capture everybody, not only people who are on the job, but who might not be on the job or providing these types of services in another capacity or another time. So I will leave it there so we can move on. And I just say thank you, Mr. Doherty, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney.
Merci, Monsieur Doherty, pour votre présence.
Thank you for your presence before the committee today, Mr. Doherty. We will accept your proposal to stay available. I will suspend for 5 minutes to allow the witnesses for the second hours to take their places. Thank you, Mr. Everyone. We're having some problems with Ms. Donnelly's connection. So the IT services will continue to work with her to try to correct the problem. And in the meantime, given that time is pressing, it's already 25 or 22. 5. We have to finish at 5:30, so I propose that we begin with Mr. Motz, and then if we can solve Ms. Donnelly's problem, we'll have her after Mr. Moss. Is that agreeable to everyone? Okay, Mr. Moss, welcome. Mr. Justin Moss is a paramedic, advanced care at the Peel Regional Paramedic Services, and he will speak to us. And then we'll have Elizabeth Donnelly, an associate professor as an individual. And then Mr. Paul Hills, President of the Paramedics Association from Saskatoon, and he represents the International Firefighters Association. So welcome all three of you. You have 5 minutes each for your presentations. We'll begin with you, Mr. Moss, for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The committee for it is very important, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak on this issue. I am an advanced care paramedic with the Region of Peel. I'm also a clinician scientist, having finished a PhD a little over a year ago. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Toronto. After working clinically as a paramedic for nearly 18 years, I've transitioned primarily into a role now that focuses on applied health research on health and well-being issues that are affecting my colleagues in the paramedic services. I would say to you that paramedics provide vital care to Canadians. We are an important part of our country's healthcare and public safety infrastructure. My colleagues provide care from the moment of birth right through to the moment of death. And Canadians are coming to rely more and more on paramedics in Canada as we fill gaps in primary health and social care. But despite the importance of the services that we provide in the years leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic, paramedics have been found to have some of the highest rates of work-related mental illness among public safety personnel in Canada. And this includes post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, disturbed sleep, chronic pain, and alarmingly high rates of suicidality. We know from research that situations that involve threats to physical safety, such as violence, increase the risk of adverse mental health outcomes, including post-traumatic stress disorder. And we are seeing that in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, reports of violent attacks on healthcare professionals, public safety personnel, including paramedics, are growing at an alarming rate. Unfortunately, most of the incidents are never formally reported or tracked, and this means that only the most serious incidents tend to capture attention, and the vast majority go unreported. This makes the true scope of the problem hard to measure and hard to grasp. My colleagues in Peel Region have been researching this topic extensively. In an earlier study of our personnel in Peel Region, 1 in 4 of our active duty paramedics were found to have significant symptoms of either post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, or generalized anxiety disorder as recently as February 2020, when we stopped collecting data just before the pandemic. In a series of studies that we have done internally in Peel Region, we found that despite a majority of our personnel experiencing some form of violence, less than 40% formally reported or documented the incidents to their supervisors. In partnership with community and industry experts, we've developed a novel reporting process to track this problem. Whenever our paramedics are dispatched to a 911 call and they complete their paperwork, they are prompted to complete a new violence report if they experience violence during the interaction. And over a 2-year study period, we found that nearly 50% of our active duty paramedics filed a violence report. 40% of those reports documented a physical or a sexual assault. 25% of the reports that we saw documented some form of verbal abuse on either gender, sexual orientation, race, or ethnicity, and those incidents were associated with an increased risk of emotional and psychological distress. 81 of our paramedics were physically harmed during this 2-year period. That corresponds to 10% of our active duty workforce. Expressed as rates, these findings suggest that one of our paramedics was experiencing violence every 18 hours, was physically or sexually assaulted every 46 hours, and was physically harmed as a result of a violent attack every 9 days. And in closing, I would suggest that this degree of violence creates the potential for significant physical and psychological harm, and as Canadians come to rely on paramedic care more and more, this creates a significant vulnerability from our health human resource perspective. In order for Canadians to be able to depend on paramedics to provide skilled, compassionate, and high-quality care, they must be protected from acts of violence.
Merci, Monsieur Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. We will suspend a few seconds to do a last test with Ms. Donnelly, and if it works, we can have her testimony right away. Thank you. President of the Saskatoon Paramedics Association. Mr. Hills, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, and thank you, fellow witnesses. I appreciate the opportunity to come here, be invited to appear today to discuss Bill 321. As stated before, I'm Paul Hills. I'm the president of the Saskatoon Paramedic Association. I represent IFF Local 3270. On behalf of over 27,000 paramedics and firefighters in across Canada who belong to the IFF, we strongly support Bill 321. I personally have been coming to the Hill advocating for this issue for over a decade. I've been a medic for over 25 years and a strong advocate for my profession for over 18. I serve one of the busiest cities per capita in Canada for EMS. I'm here personally because I have been a victim of violence and witnessed external acts of violence in the workplace. Just to give you a quick snapshot of what a shift looks like for a paramedic, we normally start our 12-hour shift with a team briefing. We go check our trucks, and then it's go, go, go. We rarely have any breaks. That means no breakfast, no lunch, no supper compared to the average worker. Not to mention while experiencing some of the most horrific and heart-wrenching situations that exist in society. In an instance involving children being stabbed by their parents, families tragically dying in motor vehicle collisions. The IFF supports this bill because we believe this legislation and the tougher penalties it proposes will build a strong foundation to address the growing trend of violence towards first responders and healthcare workers across Canada. The Criminal Code rightly addresses acts of violence against peace officers, and now this is an opportunity to address acts of violence against paramedics and firefighters, as they are almost a daily occurrence. As a paramedic, I've seen many new pieces of safety equipment added to our ensembles over the years. The one piece of equipment coming out of school that I never thought that I would be issued was that of a bulletproof vest. We've been wearing them in Saskatoon for over 15 years. This is not a piece of equipment that, as a paramedic, I should be issued last I checked. It is for military and police officers, not frontline healthcare workers. An IFF survey has shown that 13% of departments experience at least one act of violence towards on-duty personnel at structure fires in the last 5 years, while 40% reported acts of violence towards personnel during medical calls in that same time period. I know firsthand that violence and threats against us are on the rise. There is no shortage of examples. Personally, I've had my life and my family's life threatened by gang members. I've had machetes and knives pulled on me, removed guns from patients while attending to their medical needs. My best friend was in a house and had a patient with a 9mm beside him in the chair and had to choose possibly to get shot in the face and have a chance to fight back or run away and get shot in the back. Luckily, it turned out safely. In Toronto just 2 weeks ago, a firefighter attempting to put out a fire at an encampment was attacked with a 6-foot piece of PVC piping, hit in the face for no reason whatsoever. In British Columbia, interactions with overdose patients have become violent or aggressive once we've rendered medical care to save their lives. In Winnipeg, a firefighter got stabbed in the back while attending to a patient on a sidewalk. I could spend the rest of the hour sharing real-life events, as my partner here could as well, considering violent acts or near misses, but the takeaway is it's real and it's happening right now. We must acknowledge that the consequences of violent calls aren't just physical injuries, but may have long-lasting mental health injuries. In Montreal, for example, a local 125 member was chased by a man with a large knife. He had to barricade himself in a room, and although he was not physically injured, he was never able to return to work after 10 years of disability. The IFF understands and supports the overarching need to address root causes behind violent acts towards paramedics, firefighters, and healthcare workers. These may stem from societal issues such as economic inequality, addictions, and mental health. But in the meantime, we agree that there's a role for federal government to play in protecting paramedics and firefighters and healthcare workers from the real threat of workplace violence in the form of tougher criminal code penalties. To me, it isn't just about accountability for those that perpetrate violence against us or other healthcare workers. To me, it's about closure for the victim. The closure comes from a recognition of decision makers that we deserve better by caring for those that care for all of us in our time of need. We need to use all the tools in the toolbox as we've discussed, whether it be C3, whether it be 321 or 324, to help deter the violence and help the helpers. 321 will definitely help in this mission. So we urge the committee members to support this bill going forward and any other amendments that are necessary. And thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to answering any questions.
You still have 30 seconds, 30 seconds.
Yeah, now I can ad lib.
Okay, good. Okay, c'est bon, merci.
That's fine, thank you. I understand that Ms. Donnelly's system is not working any better. We can try one last time. Let's go ahead.
Hello, Ms. Donnelly. If you could give us just one more sentence.
For sure. Hopefully it works this time.
Yeah, maybe you could give us just a few more sentences.
Oh, I'm sorry.
15 seconds.
I would really, really, really love the opportunity to address this committee. I am deeply distressed at the possibility that I may not be able to share. I did submit comments, but I would like to tell you if we can make it happen.
Alors, Madame Donnelly,
Well, Ms. Donnelly, I'm sorry, but it's not working any better for interpretation. We hear you, but the quality of the sound is not sufficient to provide proper interpretation, and we have to make sure that interpreters are satisfied with the quality of the sound that we're asking them to work with. So unfortunately, we can't hear you today, but if it's possible for you to send us a copy of your notes or whatever you wanted to tell us, that'd be great. And ideally, if you can do it by tomorrow at the end of business, we could familiarize ourselves with it and take it into account. Thank you in any event, Ms. Donnelly. So we'll go to the first round of questions.
oui, Monsieur Garrison.
Yes, Mr. Garrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've repeatedly had this problem, and it would be an extreme coincidence if it's always the fault of the person presenting. I had this problem in our last meeting when I was appearing virtually. It is clear when you're appearing virtually that others who are appearing virtually can hear the person just fine, and the sound quality is just fine. So I want to assure Ms. Donnelly it's nothing she's doing, that we have some problem in the programming or in the interface, either between those online and those in the room, or between the room and the interpretation booths. I have raised this repeatedly over the last year, and we continue to call people who are testifying and say, move closer to your router, move your microphone. That's clearly not the problem. And we need to get to the root of this problem so that this does not continue to happen. So I would ask that we ask the technical staff to look into this problem rather than assuming in each case that by complete chance, every one of the witnesses or people presenting virtually is doing something wrong. There's clearly something wrong in the system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur Garrison.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Garrison's point of order, Professor Donnelly is coming through very clearly to us. That's my, I guess, why I'm puzzled. We hear her fine. Are the interpreters getting a different feed because she's coming through clear as day to us here? I'm not sure. Is everybody else hearing her clearly? Because I am. So I'm puzzled as to why we're not hearing her evidence, especially somebody who's taken the time. It's really tragic.
Merci, Monsieur Caputo. Je suis d'accord avec vous.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. I agree with you, but as you know, it's not you or I or anyone here who can determine whether the quality of the sound is sufficient. We have to trust our interpreters because they're the ones working with this issue. But I agree with you. I could hear Ms. Donnelly, and Mr. Garrison is right to say that Ms. Donnelly hasn't done anything wrong. The problem isn't her. It's somewhere between her microphone and reception here in the interpretation booth. So we're really sorry, Ms. Donnelly. And once again, if you could send us your notes, we will take them into account in our deliberations. Mr. Moore wanted to speak as well. Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my point has just been made by Mr. Garrison and then by Mr. Caputo, but just to say, the witnesses, what I could hear couldn't be more clear. It's just as clear as what I'm hearing from you, just as clear as what I'm hearing from Mr. Garrison. So it really is quite unacceptable that we can't hear from these witnesses, and this has happened a number of times. So just to say it's perfectly clear on my end as well, and look forward to reading, Ms. Donnelly, your presentation then if it's unable to work for today.
Merci, Monsieur Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Someone else wanted to intervene? Mr. Garrison? Is that your hand up from the last time, or you have something else to say? No.
Chair, I do have something to say. I want to say again that no one around the table is suggesting that we do harm to the interpreters. Everyone understands that the problem is not also with the interpreters. The problem is a technical problem that we failed to solve here somehow. I participated using the very same equipment from the very same spot yesterday in the House of Commons as a whole and in my caucus meetings without any problem. The only problem was when I tried to do so in this room. And so today I came to the constituency office to do so. So I am not asking it in my requests that we do any harm to interpreters, just to be clear, or that we ignore the concerns about the health and safety of interpreters. My problem is that we have not addressed this technical problem which has occurred multiple times.
Merci, Monsieur Garrison.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Does someone else want to intervene, or can we go to the first round of questions? All right, so Mr. Caputo, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I thanked our professor online here already. Thank you for her time. Thank you, Dr. Maj. Thank you, Mr. Hills. I'm a U of S grad, so it's good to see you here. But when we were talking, Mr. Hills and Dr. Maz, you can feel free to jump on in. I had asked Mr. Doherty a question just about kind of the deterioration of things when it comes to people in uniform that, and he touched on it, and I believe you were here for his testimony. In terms of the degree of respect, and I understood you wanted to weigh in. So the time is now if you want to weigh in on that issue.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much. I think it's pretty simple from what I've been seeing in my career since even prior to COVID, during COVID, and afterwards. Society as a whole has lost a piece of kindness. We stopped being kind to each other. When I walk into someone's home, even just everyday Joe Blow, there's just a level of understanding and lack of respect for the work that we do. And sometimes we're just treated poorly and blaming the system on us rather than understanding what we're bringing to the table, being there to help them, being there to care for them. And then you take it to the extreme of they're gang members. Other people never used to really strike out at us, but now the amount of verbal abuse, the amount of threats, people banging on our ambulances, it's just, there's a lack of respect and kindness really for people helping anyone. And even in the hospital system as well, people screaming at nurses when they walk into the triage area, people screaming at doctors. It just, we've allowed it to be okay to harm each other rather than just respecting and being kind to each other. And that's all I kind of really wanted to touch on. I don't know how to fix it, but it's just, I think calling a spade is, we're just not as nice to each other as we actually could be.
Thank you. Dr. Maz, do you have anything to add, or I can move on to the next question?
We could all benefit from a little bit more kindness. I would say that when my team reviews the violence reports, the things that my colleagues are describing and using quotes shock the mind. Utterly reprehensible in many cases, and it troubles me deeply.
Well, see, and that's where my next question goes, and I apologize if this is a bit of a technical question, but it's something that's really lingering, and it's this idea of reporting and charging. My question is this: is the issue, from your perspective, one that people who are subject to threats in your industry, do they just kind of say, you know, I've been told it comes with the territory, I've been told nothing's going to happen, so I don't report it? Or is it reported and nothing happens?
I think it's a combination of a few different things, and I'm sure my colleague would echo these sentiments. When we've talked to people that work as paramedics in the region of Peel, we've asked them exactly this question. They tell us a few things. First, that the violence that they're experiencing is so widespread that it fades into the background as another chronic stressor, particularly when we're talking about abusive comments. And they tell me that the people who are perpetrating these acts of verbal abuse, very often there's no consequences for them, and it becomes perceived as being unpreventable. And if you take this series of things, widespread and chronic, without consequence and being perceived as unpreventable, to its logical conclusion, this expectancy of people to be able to just brush off and move on from acts of violence as necessary to function in the work just becomes part of the job. That's what we see empirically, and I'm sure my colleague would echo some of these sentiments.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my lived experience, I've been called some of the nastiest things, and it just, you know, I've been pushed, I've been shoved, but there's a big difference between me at 6'3", 250 versus another paramedic who's first day on the job. My niece just started in the profession. You know, her experiencing that now today versus me sort of like the frog in boiling water over 25 years, kind of, you know, creating a thicker skin is a lot different. So, you know, her longevity in a career might not last because she's facing these horrific statements and acts of violence on a much higher rate right now. And yeah, you just get used to it. You know, me getting pushed is a lot different than, again, somebody else getting pushed. So my tolerance level is there based on experience and based on, you know, physical presence. But that still doesn't make it okay. It just, like you pointed out, it's a tolerance. And unfortunately, that's just something that we're all starting to wear, and it's starting to wear very thin.
No, and I understand that, and even beyond the pushing, I mean, it's similar for correctional officers. They are verbally abused, and the attitude is, well, what are you going to do, put me in jail? That's not going to happen, right? But even beyond that, when it crosses the line into an assault or a threat, both of which are clear criminal offenses, I mean, to me, it seems as though the way to address this, at least in part, is to actually take action. Because if you don't take action, there will be no consequences, and it just perpetuates, right? And it perpetuates from the person committing the act, but it also perpetuates in the mind of the person who's the victim, as in, this just goes without saying. Can I get your comments on that, please?
If I may, I think we have no faith in the system. To be respectful to the chair when he was talking about, you know, do we trust the courts to do this? The courts right now have an opportunity to charge people that punch me or kick me in the face, stab me. They don't. So, I mean, this just adds a level of protection and a level of reasonability, and puts something in law that says a first responder, paramedic, firefighter will get their fair shake and fair protection in the courts. Because right now, they can be charged. They're just not. Prosecutors drop it. Police drop it. It's not taken seriously. We need something more than what exists.
I know we have 10 seconds. I encourage. Okay. No second. Okay. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Mon.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hills, and especially to Professor Donnelly. I hope you can hear me. It's MP Mendocino, and I just want to acknowledge that you come from a great town of Windsor. It's where my wife's family's from. So we'll find a way to make sure that your comments are fully reflected in our deliberations. And thank you for bearing with all of the technological deficiencies today. I want to thank Mr. Doherty as well for advancing this private member's bill. And I know, Mr. Hills, you said this has been the subject of your advocacy now for about a decade. And I believe there is a fairly strong consensus that making some of the modifications to the criminal code along the lines that have been proposed in this legislation would be another mechanism or another tool by which, one, we deter people from threatening or trying to do harm to people that work in your professions by specifically enumerating them. But secondly, as well, and this is a point that I thought Mr. Doherty made, by extension, showing that we value the work that you do. So I just want to briefly dig into the scope of the challenge that we face, because the trend lines are all very worrying. In the United States, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimated recently that there are approximately 2,000 emergency medical services personnel injured every year in a violent-related incident. That's in their country. And here in Canada in 2019, the Canadian Nurses Association noted that, and this is their words, 1/3 of nurses worldwide reported being victims of physical assault, which is consistent, Mr. Moz, with the statistics that you provided, where we were talking about a range of about 1 in 4 paramedics being encountered with some kind of threat of or actual violence. What I'd like to ask is, on the issue of reporting or underreporting, because you said, Mr. Moz, approximately 40% of people who have been either threatened or the victim of an assault do not report, which is significant. It's high. What are some of the ways in which we can reduce the barriers so that the people in your profession feel like they can step up, report the incident, be treated with dignity, be treated in a way that is trauma-informed, which is part of the line of the work that you do, coincidentally, so that we can shine a greater light on this problem?
It is an incredibly important question, and I'm grateful that you've brought it up. If you'll permit me, I would say that the figure that you referred to earlier was 1 in 4. That was 1 in 4 of our members in the Peel Region Paramedic Service that had current symptoms of either PTSD, depression, or anxiety just before the pandemic. In respect of violence, it's 1 in 2. 1 in 2 of our members over a 2-year study period reported exposure to violence. I am very pleased to be able to say that in our earlier study, where less than 40% of paramedics who had experienced some form of violence took any action to document it, with the changes that we have made in our service by introducing a new reporting system that eliminates many administrative barriers, with the efforts of my colleagues, some of whom who are here today, many who are not, in changing the culture within our organization, willingness to report has more than doubled. We've revisited this topic, and because of the changes that we have been able to implement, paramedics are much more willing to come forward to report.
Mr. Moz, can you just give me 2 quick examples of how you've reduced those barriers? I think that's a good sign of progress, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Hills to chime in, and then I've got one last question.
Gladly, absolutely. We implemented a new reporting process. This is embedded in our electronic patient care record. After every 911 call, our members are prompted to fill it out if they've experienced violence. That's the tip of the iceberg. A lot of this took a lot of time, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears behind the scenes, convincing people one person at a time, and most importantly, seeing that when they do file reports, that they're taken seriously. They're actioned by our leadership team in a trauma-informed way, and in many cases, they have led to criminal charges where the threshold of criminality is met.
Mr. Hills?
In regards to reporting, he's the data guy. I mean, to say it a bit more real guy. We don't have time to fill out paperwork at work. Our guys are so tired and overtaxed in what they do every day. The last thing they want to do is fill out another paperwork. The only time that recently we've had people fill out paperwork typically is if they seek medical attention. I had 2 this weekend. People assaulted, sought medical attention. Other than that, we do have documentation. Our employer's fantastic. There's routes to do this. It is not heavily embedded in our culture. I look at this situation like the 5-minute mile. We don't think that it's possible right now. With your help, we can run a 5-minute mile. We need that first case. We need that first situation where a situation will happen and someone will be held accountable, and that will spread like wildfire. And paramedics will have one situation where they can feel that decision makers are taking their job seriously and protecting them and doing something to make their life better at work.
In my remaining time, I'd just like to talk about the trends post-pandemic, because Mr. Moz, you said that in the wake of the pandemic that the trend lines were all going in the wrong direction, which is up. Do you think this has anything to do with mis or disinformation? And do you think any of this has to do with the prevalence of disinformation online? Have you seen anything that you can offer to this committee so that we can talk about ways to prevent these incidents from occurring in the first place?
Would you want to ask for a written submission?
If time is constrained, but if they could just maybe in a few seconds, Madam Chair, and obviously we'd be happy to take a submission.
Well, time's up for that one, but maybe another questioner can ask them that question. Monsieur Fortin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Mr. Fortin, thank you, Madam Chair. I can't refuse anything from the former Minister of Public Safety. So if you want to answer Mr. Mendocino's question during my time, go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. I will make it very brief. I'm hesitant to comment too far beyond the realm of my expertise. I will say that working clinically as a paramedic at the beginning of the pandemic, we were lauded as heroes. People were very kind. They donated things to us. They banged pots in the evening and thanked us for our service. At some point, that changed. It's hard for me to say within the limits of my expertise exactly what's caused it, but I am very much aware from a felt sense of what you're describing.
Inaudible. You say that many of the assaults you witness or hear of are not being reported. So what I'm wondering is, if C-321 is adopted, will that change anything, or are there also, or instead, other things that can be done? Do you have the impression that you are properly protected physically when you intervene? Is there additional equipment that should be provided? And do your employers encourage you to file complaints? I was listening to you earlier. You said we don't want to do too much paperwork, but isn't there anything else that could be done to improve the situation? Or is just the fact of saying there will be aggravating circumstances if an assault is committed against a healthcare professional or a paramedic, will that be sufficient to change the situation?
Thank you for your question. It is one tool in the toolbox. We do have to work on reporting. We need to not reinvent the wheel. We need to learn from better practice around the country and share information on what is working. Research coming out of Peel, they are leaders in the industry as far as mental health research goes, and we need to learn from the chiefs and disseminate that information down to the front line. So as far as reporting, we need to get better at that, educate our members, make it easier for them to do it. In regards to other mechanisms, we have staging policies for violent acts. We have the ability to call police if necessary, in significant situations, but that also depends if our radios work. That also depends if they're not busy. That also depends on, I don't know that someone's going to pull a knife on me. I don't know that there's a gun beside someone because they're calling me because they have a sore back and then they have mental health issues. So there are a lot of things in place. It's not to say that this is the one be all end all. This is just a major foundational piece, I think, moving forward that will assist cultural change in industries that aren't a Peel, aren't a Medavie, aren't a Saskatoon, small mom and pop shops that say, we have someone else doing what they need to do to take care of us in multiple of areas and put it all together.
Merci. J'aimerais peut-être vous en...
Thank you. I'd like to hear both of you, perhaps. I'd like to know how the courts deal with this. I understand that the incidents are not always reported, but when there's an assault or threats or an injury or death threat or some kind of physical assault against a paramedic, when that happens and you decide to complain and it ends up before the courts, in your experience, how do judges deal with these cases? Is it dealt with seriously, or do you get the impression that it's not taken properly into consideration?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question. It's very important.
A number of things need to line up in order for a violent act to escalate to the level where the legislation would take effect. We need to remember that the incident needs to be reported to the police. The police need to investigate. The threshold of criminality needs to be met, and then the case needs to be brought before a judge. So there are multiple points along this journey where that system, that chain, I think, can falter. I think what we do see in the data is that a large portion of the incidents are not felt to meet that threshold where it is warranted to be reported to the police or the police feel it is warranted to be brought for criminal prosecution. So I think illustrating the harms that this sort of exposure has for our colleagues, I think illustrating the importance on a societal level of protecting our members to making sure that we can provide life-saving care, I think with those things we'll see meaningful change.
We understand that C-321 could make the sentence more severe or be considered an aggravating factor when a situation like that occurs, but C-321 won't change anything about the degree of evidence or the type of evidence that has to be presented when there's a situation of threat or assault. How do you believe that the provisions of C-321 will help? I'd like to hear your thoughts about that. What will it change for you and your members, your colleagues, if C-321 is passed?
Recognition that we're putting ourselves in situations that normal people don't put themselves into. My back is turned. to gang members. I'm walking into houses that are weapons. I have people with needles and guns protecting themselves, and those turn on me. It's just a recognition again that we're doing what most people aren't doing. If that's the best I can do it.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Garrison?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks very much to both witnesses for being here today, and my sympathies to Ms. Donnelly, who I very much would like to have heard from as part of this session. Obviously, I'm in support of this bill, but I have a concern that this bill is not enough. And so we have heard very moving testimony for the impacts on individual paramedics.
Madame la Présidente, on me dit qu'il n'y a pas d'interprétation.
Madam Chair, I'm told there's no interpretation.
Can you speak a little bit more? They're saying that the sound is not well enough to interpret. Le son n'est pas bien pour l'interprétation.
The sound is not sufficient for interpretation.
It's difficult for me to say anything which will not be extremely frustrated. I am in my constituency office on the House of Commons desktop computer, and if the system can't accommodate this, then we have a serious problem.
We're going to suspend for a minute or two. Mr. Garrison, thank you. You've sent me the question on your behalf because it's not an option not to have interpretation. And they are unable to interpret. So we're going to continue. I'm going to ask the question on behalf of Mr. Garrison. My question to the witnesses, can the witnesses tell us a bit more about the costs to the system resulting from this situation in terms of things like sick leave and stress leave and retention of those with valuable training and experience in the profession? Thank you.
Again, data guy, story guy. So, I mean, people get assaulted. They decide not to come work tomorrow. I don't get lunch for 12 hours. I decide not to come work tomorrow. I mean, there is so many stressors on a paramedic specifically that I can speak to that it is unfathomable why they decide to keep coming to work, honestly. I commend my staff every day when they come to work because it is awful right now. And then when I hear on the weekend that multiple more paramedics are assaulted and then they still show up to work the next day, it just baffles me. You know, the only time that they take time off work is if they're injured to the point where they can't show up at work after medical attention. We have had one of my members took multiple months off after their vehicle was surrounded by multiple assailants threatening to kill them inside the vehicle. So it's time loss. We cannot sacrifice a single paramedic on the street these days. That is how short we are. We are running short every single day, and one person leaving is detrimental to our system and the health and wellness of the rest of our paramedics trying to do what we do every day.
Thank you very much. So I am now going to go to the final round. It's 5:19. My understanding is it was agreed to leave at 5:30. And so I am going to shorten the rounds. And Mr. Van Popta, maybe for 3 minutes.
Okay, I can do something worthwhile in 3 minutes with these competent witnesses. So, Dr. Maz, I'm going to focus on an article that you had published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health just recently, and a shout out to Professor Donnelly as well, who is a contributor to that. So thank you so much. I put the question to you, Professor, but you're not here, so the question goes to Dr. Maz. I appreciate the empirical approach to collecting data, and in the study you noted the lack of data due to underreporting. And you had said that, and you talked about it in your testimony as well, leveraging a novel reporting process embedded within the electronic patient record. And from that, you said you were getting more reliable data. But now I asked this question about what are you going to do with that data? I asked that in the context of the evidence from the storyteller, Paul Hills, who said that even those reported cases aren't being dealt with by law enforcement people. What difference is your data going to make? Thank you.
Very important question. Thank you very much. More things that we can do with this data than I can tell you in 3 minutes, but I will do my very best to be succinct. Beyond the prospect of criminal prosecution, we use this data as actionable risk intelligence within our service. We're able to identify patterns of behavior among people that we serve in the community. We develop customized response plans so that we are balancing our provider safety with the needs that might be expressed by that patient and that they are continuing to get skilled, high-quality pre-hospital care. We use this to improve dispatch processes. We use this to put flags on patients who have a known history of violence. We use this to develop business cases for new equipment, for new training, for new procedures. We use this to promote interprofessional collaboration with our colleagues in police and our colleagues in allied health, including community crisis workers.
Okay, still another question. Okay. Okay, so what we're studying here today is Bill C-321, a private member's bill of our colleague, Mr. Doherty, which would make assaulting a healthcare worker an aggravating circumstance in sentencing. So with this additional data, what difference is that going to make in sentencing? Because that's really what we're after, to keep our healthcare workers safer through law enforcement.
One thing I would say in respect of the bill specifically is that the majority, excuse me, I shouldn't say majority, the degree to which the violence we are seeing among our members rises to the level of criminal remains to be determined. I don't know. I don't have a number for that. But even in the absence of criminal assault on our people, there are tangible things that we can do to strengthen the safety of our members as well as the safety of the communities that we are responsible to serve.
Thank you. I'll see my time.
Thank you very much. I was going to give you 3.5. Okay, Ms. Demoff.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for being here. Just before I start, I wanted to give a shout out to Carmen Santoro, who's here with the IAAF. He proudly served the town of Oakville for many years with the fire service, and it's really nice to have him here and know he's still continuing to do that good work. And Mr. Hills, you graciously took me on a ride-along with you in Saskatoon this summer. And we got an opportunity to talk to people at the hospital and talk to people at the some of your coworkers about this issue. And I wonder, one of the things that I was thinking about, can you choose not to attend an emergency when you know that there's a good chance you're going to be physically assaulted?
Very, very good question. Our right to refuse unsafe work is an extremely high threshold. Now, obviously, we have ability through 911, flagged addresses, whether it be police notifying us that there's weapons involved. We will typically stage in those situations and not go there until police are there and clear the scene. But once we're in a situation where it's unsafe, it's no holds barred. How do you get out of that situation? How do you deter the situation from getting worse? How do you de-escalate the situation? Those are all skills and abilities that come with either experience or just situational, and we don't know. So that's where this comes into play, is that it's hard for me in the moment to just call up and say, hey, I'm done. I'm going to tap out of here. Just please don't stab me. I'm just going to go over here. And it's just not possible sometimes. So yes, if my life is in threat and they're telling me to go into that place where someone's holding a gun, then I have the ability to say no. But often we don't know that situation is there until we get in there.
Yeah, and you have a job where you're already putting your lives at risk, just by the profession that you've chosen, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if I may, like the one moment that they talked about as far as being a healthcare worker on our days off, it is embedded in us to respond to situations that we come across. So if I'm in plain clothes and something happens, I'm going to do something. Now, does that person, is it fair to them? They don't know that I'm a paramedic, and then if they decide to stab me, they're going to get it worse. But the reality is, again, I'm putting myself in this situation because it's born and bred into me and my other colleagues, firefighters, healthcare professionals, to put ourselves in those situations, unlike a different cross-section of the population.
Yeah. I only have a few seconds left. Do you think this bill, and thank you very much, Mr. Doherty, will increase the number of people who do report because they feel that there are actual consequences for what happens?
If I may,
either one of you.
I absolutely. Knowing that people care about us and are doing something to make my job better is what we need right now. A pot and a pan on a front step is great. I need someone to do something to make my job better, because right now we're losing paramedics at an alarming rate, nurses, other healthcare workers, and the threat is real and we need to fix it, address it now.
Do you agree, Dr. Moss?
Yes, because it sends a signal that we take this problem seriously.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a few extra seconds.
Thank you to you. And Mr. Garrison is okay for today, and I'm going to give the last 2 minutes to Monsieur Fortin. You can have 2.5. I'm
Merci, Madame la
generous.
Présidente. No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a simple question for the witnesses. I was discussing this with Mr. Doherty earlier. The text that C-321 proposes says that the courts seized with a case must or shall consider the situation as an aggravating factor if there's an assault on a healthcare professional or first responder. Shall consider leads me to question this. Sometimes there may be nuances. I was giving an example earlier. A doctor wants to help someone in a hospital. The person is injured and screams, "I'll cut your hands off if you touch me one more time." That kind of statement may not be a true threat. So I'm wondering would you be comfortable, given your experience? I know you're not lawyers, but you have experience as paramedics in emergency situations. You've probably had to go before courts in a situation where you were victims of threats or situations where your colleagues were victims of assault or threats. And it seems to me you have some expertise on those situations. So I'd like to know, are you comfortable? Would you feel that it would be beneficial if, instead of saying that the courts shall consider something an aggravating circumstance, the court can consider something an aggravating factor. So giving the judge the discretion to decide whether it should or should not be an aggravating circumstance, or whether this is a case where they shouldn't do that.
Absolutely. And if we switch roles for a minute, I'll tell a very brief story. One of my colleagues, the president of our union, as luck would have it, was assaulted by a patient who was under the influence of, I believe, mushrooms, was drug affected, a young man who made a bad choice and knocked over my colleague, and he suffered a concussion, and he was unable to work for a little while. This young man made a poor decision, and he deserves to be held accountable for that decision, but not necessarily spend the rest of his life in prison or have his life ruined. I always think context is important in decisions that must be approached with seriousness.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Moss, Monsieur Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Moss, Mr. Hills.
Well,
thank you to all our witnesses this afternoon
for appearing. Ms. Donnelly, we are going to offer you to return back in person in a few weeks. The clerk will contact you and hopefully work a suitable time with you, if that's okay with you. Yes, okay, perfect. So thank you very much, everyone. Meeting is suspended for today, and our next meeting will be Tuesday afternoon. Thank you. Adjourned.